Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of FPC Fantasy Live. Here on Sunday mornings, it's week 13. We're here on December 3rd. We were just saying December. I was trying to say November. Man, how the fantasy season goes. I mean, I know some leagues I'm in, the playoffs have already started. In other leagues, they might begin next week. I think of something like the Scott Fish Bowl, for instance, where the playoffs started last week. Same Jeff Lambert going for two. He makes a zombie league. There's two stages of the playoffs. The first stage of the playoffs started last week. So for some, week 12 already was the fantasy playoffs. And here we are, week 13. A lot of leagues will be week 15. So we're still a couple weeks away. Means, still important regular season games to win to try and get to the fantasy playoffs. That's ultimately the goal of the regular season. And then from there, it's winning few key matchups. And yeah, super excited to be here this morning. The format of the show is I will talk fantasy football start sit decisions. I create my own spreadsheet for my decisions, so I'll share that so people can see what I'm doing with my leagues, but also the reasons. How am I making these decisions? What are the factors that I'm looking at to try and decide how to go about it? So yeah, um, once we get through that, I'll also talk about the injury report, the updated actives and actives. I guess first thing is there's a couple players later that are questionable. Um, I know that and it's tricky with so few games this week. There aren't many options even as early as the 4 o'clock games. I know one league it's a league. I think it's a dynasty league. I'm probably not going to make the playoffs. I don't think I've been mathematically eliminated yet, but I would need to there's a median scoring average weeks to get 2 potential wins per week. I'd probably need to win all 4, you know, win my matchup and get above the league average this week and next week to get those 4 wins just to make a difference and hope that a couple people ahead of me don't win at all. And yeah, it's a pretty long shot. But in that league, I've got Chris Godwin, and uh, I think the best replacement I have is either Chase Edmonds or Drew Sample. So things are looking pretty rough. I know there's another league that I co-manage with my friend Akili, and we had a few players questionable: Noah Brown, Chris Godwin, Jaden Reed, and pretty conventional redraft scoring league. I can't remember if it's half or full PPR. I think it's half PPR, and 14 teams will only start 7. Start 7, yeah, yeah, because there's only two potential to start up to 3 wide receivers max. We already have Devontae Smith, so I think we made that decision to just bench Chris Godwin, and we'll decide with Noah Brown. I think if Noah Brown is out, we'll put in Jeff Wilson instead, and I've got quite a few leagues with Noah Brown. I've got him in 9 leagues, and in 8 of those leagues, he's in the lineups right now, but I've also got replacements set up. I've got a whole list here. Who do I have, potentially replacing Noah Brown? It's a bunch of players to the point where if Brown's healthy, I want him in. He's got so much upside, and that offense is so great, but examples are Justin Watson, um, Robert Woods, direct replacement on the Texans. One league I picked up Lynn Bowden. It's like I really want Noah Brown to play. Marquez Valdez Scantling. The one league I decided to bench him. It's like Kyron Williams, T. Higgins, DeAndre Swift. Like, really pretty good team. It's only a 10-team dynasty league, but still, it's quite an impressive team I put together. I think if I win this week, I clinch a playoff spot. Already looking pretty good. Still 2 weeks away, so if I win this week, victory next week will certainly get me in the playoffs. But yeah, that's looking good. I think the first round bye is still available, but that's another one where I have to win both these weeks, and at least one of the 2 teams currently in the first round bye. I think they're 2 games ahead and have them lose both. A couple leagues where Jeff again mentioned that Jeff Wilson is the answer to Noah Brown. Let me see, one league it's Dearness Johnson. So yeah, not the greatest option. So the point where I'd like to play Noah Brown. But then again, the complications of that one particular league I was mentioning, Noah Brown, Jake Reed, and Chris Godwin, had to make the tough decision to just okay, Noah Brown can't go. We could throw in Chris Godwin, but then if Chris Godwin can't go, suddenly we're risking it with Jaden Reed, and even then it's Edwards Hilaire is their Jaden Reed replacement, already down to not so great there. So the thinking is if Noah Brown's out, I'll just flex the we'll just flex the running back instead, Jeff Wilson in this case. With A Chain's return, they play it slow still, they don't give him too much. but that's we'll play that there, and then throw Jaden Reed into the wide receiver, which means we'd have to actually go and drop Clyde and pick a receiver that plays late. And there's a couple guys on the waiver wire, so we can totally do that. I want to just do that anyway. Clyde's not really doing much, but yeah. So there's definitely options there. I think. To be fair, I think the reason we haven't made it yet is because one of those players is Dontavian Wicks, and he's questionable. So if we find out Reed's out but Wicks is in, then we can make the change, drop Clyde, pick up Wicks, and play him in the wide receiver spot. So some complicated things with Jayden Reed because he plays late. One league it's Tyler Boyd who's playing on Monday night, and that's the thing I'd recommend is try to get it into the flex spot. For instance, a couple leagues where it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be the replacement in hope that the Packers' run defense allows them to score a touchdown. That's really the hope there. If you can't, though, I mean, there's still some good viable wide receivers. One league will be going with Tyler Boyd. Um, yeah, so tricky with Jayden Reed because I have him ranked as a top 20 wide receiver this week. So he's the type of with him, if he's active, I want to play him. It looks like the Packers are targeting him a ton. I don't think the Packers are going to have much success on the ground against the Chiefs. They're really good run defense for most of the year, those game notwithstanding. But it's the Eagles. I think everyone understands that. I think yeah, for the go Pack go. I want them to win, and for them to have success and win, I think it's got to be a big Jordan Love game like it has been the last couple weeks. Gonna have to air it out a ton, and I think that's a lot of targets towards Jayden Reed. It seems like it'd be the advantageous corner matchup. Full press Packers pod this week. I had Braden Holochek on Sunday morning live streams in do of course everything Braden does through the week. Full press Chiefs, but yeah, I had him on and we talked about it, and it seems like L'Jarius Sneed is likely to cover Christian Watson. He'll be playing on the perimeter, mostly on the outside, and oh wait, it is Trent McDuffie. It's Trent McDuffie and Isaiah McDuffie. Now I'm confused. One's on the Packers, one's on the Chiefs. The corner on the Chiefs is um he is and Isaiah's on the Packers. But yeah, Trent McDuffie would be the slot corner covering Reed. Still a good matchup. It's slightly favorable matchup for the Chiefs, but like their best corner still seems to be Sneed. So it's not the worst matchup possible for the Packers. So I like Reed in this game. I do like Watson, but with Reed, it is a little tricky just not knowing if he's playing or not. And it's going to have to be late, and your options are limited again down to the Packers, Chiefs, Bengals, Jags. Good news is, especially at wide receiver, there's a few good options for that team, some of which will be available on waiver wires. Jayden Reed's obviously the best out of those bunch, so play him. I think it's worth it to hold him out because just make sure you have another spot on the team. Maybe already go pick up some of those players on playing Sunday night or playing Monday night. You can throw them in. If you can flex Jayden Reed, it's even better because there's certain running backs might also be able to replace him. Yeah, that's the I guess the questionable aspect to it. The one next thing that I would like to do is share my start sit spreadsheet. I don't see any questions yet in chat. So they asking, but if someone does want to come on, feel free, ask any start sit questions. Once I get through the spreadsheet, as I'm sharing the screen, look at it, I can't see the comments at that point. Once I get through a little bit of discussion, I'll check back and answer any question anyone has. All right, so let's pull this up. Start sit decisions. So yeah, for anyone watching on the regular, I do this every week. Different decisions that I have in my own leagues. And so yeah, so I think the first one, another league I co-manage, we talked about this one, and it might be really intriguing for a lot of people. This is a super flex league, so we get to start two of these quarterbacks, but there might be some interesting discussions on individual differences between these three quarterbacks: Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, Jared Goff. And so, again, super flex. So we start two of these three, but one QB league only starting one would also be tricky as well. But what you'll notice is I do a few different categories: your production metrics, average through the season, the ranges of outcomes, the projection for the week. Also looking at the targets per game. That's not going to care about the quarterbacks. And for a lot of these, I'm looking at cross positions, so it's tough to when you're comparing running backs to pass catchers. That's really tough and unfair to know like, what's the how do you compare those. So same position though. That's use that for sure. Um, the defensive ranking, so the opposing team's defense, whatever teams opposing the player you're looking at, fantasy points allowed by that team to that specific position. So for these 3 players we'll talk about first, it's points allowed by those defenses to quarterbacks specifically, and it's ranked in terms of quality of defense. So the fewest points allowed, essentially. So the number one defense in this ranking is a really good defense. You want to avoid the number 32 defense. That's the match you want to face. Also have the team totals, which I guess defense does influence in that, but the team implied total and the over/under set by the odds makers. These are the opening lines Monday that I use. I wanna know what the odds makers thought. What were their projections for the were they adjusted based on what people were betting? I wanna know what the odds makers and, goal line guide and goal line guide differential. That for those who don't know, I write an article every week called the Goal Line Guide. In there, I grade each team has a goal line grade, both for their running game and their passing attack. And the goal line guide difference is what is the difference between those 2 scores, and, like, does it positively or negatively impact the players? Again, since we're talking quarterbacks here, this is the difference relative to the passing score. So, I guess we'll start with Herbert because his score is positive 12. The Chargers have a higher, passing goal line grade to do rushing. The other 2, Kyler Murray and Jared Goff, because there's a negative. The Cardinals and Lions have higher rushing goal line grade. Yeah, so the first thought to look through is, okay, because specifically in my league, I'm deciding 2 of these 3 players. One thing I want to do is top 2. How many of these stats did one of these quarterbacks finish in the top 2? And essentially, who avoided being last in the categories the most, and that's actually Jared Goff. The only category where he was last was in the goal line guide differential, and he's just marginally lower than those. So kind of off the bat, and once I go through these start sit decisions, I will also adjust my rankings. But in my rankings initially, I actually had Kyler Murray ahead of Goff. So this really made me rethink. Murray did have the fewest categories where he was top three. He had the most categories, which was the last, and that includes his average through the games he's played. Um, while he has the highest floor, he hasn't scored less than 17 points. He also hasn't scored more than 23. So the big ceiling performances that we've seen with Goff and Herbert there. His projection is the lowest this week. It's pretty close to Goff's. Could have given Goff like a half point there. I think they're close enough, but regardless, the Cardinals are also projected to score the fewest, and that game total against the Steelers is also the lowest over under of these three anyway. One of the lower. So a lot worked against Murray in that regard. And what I did was the difference between the categories where they're the most and the fewest. So for Herbert, he has 5 categories where he's the highest, 2 the lowest. So that gives a differential of 3, which was the best of these 3 quarterbacks. Again, Murray, because he's the best in so many categories, 5 to be exact, and he's only the best in one category I mentioned earlier, that was his floor. So he's got the floor performance to get 17.46 points. This is a league where we haven't clinched the playoffs yet. We're super close. It's another, player opponent play the league median, and seems like almost every week we're scoring above the league. Even when we're not winning matchups, we're constantly getting that extra win. So I think we're pretty good. It's basically like the 1 seed is kind of a bit ahead of everyone else, and then everyone is super close from 2 to, like, 8. So, with potential of 4 wins every week, it is still important to get those, head-to-head matchups. Basically, one thing we are looking for is a floor, because we wanna score above the median of the league every week. So that does give some appeal to Murray. Herbert actually has a low floor. Get a bad game, 6.74, and against the Patriots, speaking potentially raining conditions, maybe it's there as well, but ultimately decided to go with Justin Herbert and Jared Goff. I had again Murray. I think I switched them after this, of course, but I had them at Murray at QB8, Goff at QB9, and then once I made this decision, I decided to switch them. But they're both top 10 quarterbacks, so both could be pretty good. Yeah, sometimes I just make a straight one-to-one decision. Like this one, where I still haven't quite decided, so maybe I'll just talk through what I'm thinking right now without it being so obvious. Tyler Algier versus Dearness Johnson. Half PPR league. We have to start 3 running backs. I've got Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco locking up the other 2 spots. But there's consideration to who's going to be. Or actually, no, that's not even true. This is a flex spot, I believe, because I also have Chuba Hubbard. So those 3 are locked. I have a lot of players on bye this week, and uh, anyone else who's kind of available or viable, I'm not really sure about. I guess the one guy that I also have available is Josh Kelly that might come in handy. So this is one league where I haven't fully decided yet. Maybe that's the one decision I'll have to go really make. Because between Algier and Dearness Johnson, the one thing I wanted Dearness Johnson for was to hold as a Monday night guy, kind of uh, rounding in. I think that might be it on this team, but, when I have a Monday night player, I like to hold another Monday night player and Superflex and be able to play Jake Browning in that 2v2 spot, so I could replace him with a Dearness Johnson, for instance. So, all to say right now, I am leaning Tyler Algier. I think the Tyler Algier to Josh Kelly decision, I might have to go consider that. I know, essentially, right now, I'd be holding this is one of those leagues where I have Noah Brown, so if Noah Brown's out, then I might have to just play both these guys anyway. Josh Kelly anyway, so that's definitely something I'll have to kinda consider and see. Um, I guess, the one interesting decision sure is, again, maybe speaking of Noah Brown, this league down here, between Tyler Higbee and Robert Woods, I only play one of them if Noah Brown is out, so as an injury replacement. So it's, tiered PPR, so tight ends do score more per reception than other positions. 1.75 for tight ends, 1.25 for wide receivers, and running back is just standard 1 the 1 point per reception for them, tiered to that. The tight ends get more. Was it enough to play a second tight end in his flex spot? And so I looked, and in terms of the scoring average, it's close, but Higbee does score more than Woods has so far from teammates. Woods now would get the bump, especially if I'm playing him because Brown's out, that's potentially more targets for him. One thing with Higbee is he's had some zeros this year, whereas Robert Woods, any game he's played, he's at least scored, in this case, 2.75. So somewhat of a floor. It's not super great floor, but Woods hasn't really had much of a ceiling. Now, Higbee has also not had much of a ceiling. This is last week's 2 touchdown game. He scored 23. I think, honestly, anything that other than that game for him has been right around this 14 for Robert. It's almost negligible, but that one game he showed he could do it, I suppose. The projections do favor Higbee by almost a full 2 points, coming off last week's, but then everything when it comes to well, first off, targets, Higbee it's been touchdowns, and he hasn't really scored very many. I think he's had 3 in the season. If he's not scoring a touchdown, he's not getting enough targets to do that. Woods hasn't been a big touchdown producer. He's at least been kind of somewhat consistent in terms of at least getting targets every time he's out there. So that's in the edge there. But all the team totals make sense for the because the Broncos defense is improving, but it's not nearly as good as the Browns defense, I would say. So the Texans offense is viewed as a lot better than the Rams offense. But both matchups are technically tough by their position. So the Browns got the fewest points to tight ends per game fantasy points, and then the 50th allowed by the Broncos to wide receivers. Woods' position is, but it's still technically the better matchup, marginally, of course. Team implied total and over under. There's a big difference, especially in the over under, which the passing offense is you want the back and forth shootout type game, lots of pass attempts, lots of targets. 44.5 to 38.5 in that Browns win. And then the goal line guide. This goal line differential of -55 is the second highest on the league because the Rams have the highest rushing goal line grade and the highest goal line grade overall this week is for their rush attack. So I'm super high on Kyron Williams. Oh yeah, one of the things I was going to talk about was a couple of DFS ideas. Get to that in a minute, but Kyron Williams, I think, a super strong play, a must start in lineup leagues, and because I'm ranked at RB2, so unless you are playing in leagues where you only have to start one running back, and you have McCaffrey on the same team as Kyron Williams, and you have so many other good options at wide receiver, tight end, and you're not going to flex running back, I think in one circumstance I could say you bench. If you're I would find that hard to believe that you have that many good of wide receivers that even if you only have to start one running back, that you wouldn't flex Kyron Williams. I view him as a must start in lineup leagues and close to a must start lock in DFS, which means not so much great touchdown upside for the pass catch, especially against the Browns, who have yet to and in goal line guide looks at plays inside the 5. The Browns are the only team in the NFL that have not allowed a passing touchdown inside their own 5-yard line. They've also allowed, like, 71% of rushing plays inside their 5 to be touchdowns, and that's, like, I believe the highest rate in the league defense is allowed. So Kyron Williams is a great matchup. Higby does not, and other pass catchers as well. So all the goal line stuff does favor the Texans. This plus 28, I believe, is the fifth highest differential. So if no Brown's out, I still want to take advantage, I think, and go with Robert Woods on that Texans offense. But yeah, let's take a look at see if anyone has any questions so far. Doesn't look like it, but that's okay. Um, pardon me. It's not quite noon yet, so the one thing I did want to talk about was DFS and Gladys Louise Tyler, who is my co-host on the Monday Night Two Point Conversion Show, Monday pregame show. We've been going for Two Live Network, very similar to here. We specifically talk about the Monday night props. We make picks every week for the spread, over under the game, and a player prop. So we have three chances each game. Humble brag, I'm actually winning. Last week, I went 3 for 3 and was enough to surpass Gladys finally for the first time this year. So now I'm going wire to wire. And what happened last week? Remember? Oh yeah, it was oh yeah, the Bears Vikings. I think everyone wants to forget that. I went lower, which I mostly do this year. When I've gone higher, it's usually been a mistake. So I just almost hammer the lowers all year. I went the Bears. The faith in Justin Fields paid off. They were 3-point underdogs anyway, so Minnesota say win a last second field goal and only won by 2, then it would have still been fine for me. And then I had Roshan Johnson higher than 6.5 receiving, really low total, and he smashed that. So 3 for 3, and I'm winning. Anyway, that's the humble brag of the episode. But all to say, Gladys asked me. She's entering a few. Uh, I think max out actually in the 20 max entry on the DraftKings play action. It's called. Uh, yeah, she was gonna quite a bit, and she wanted to get some lineup ideas. So I went in and I set a few DraftKings lineups. And the one stack that I really liked, again based off the goal line guide, I'm using something to kind of differentiate, is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers stack. On DraftKings specifically, you've got Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, and Kate Otten. So a three-way stack there. Kate Otten gets good cheap tight end. I think he's 3,200. Brevin Jordan, starting tight end for the Texans, he's minimum 2,500. So there's an even cheaper guy available. But really wanted to lean into the stack. I think Otten's good, cheap value tight end there. But certainly the important part of the stack is Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. 5,500, 5,600 for Baker, so pretty cheap quarterback. And then Mike Evans, you got to pay up for him, but he's not. Tyreek Hill is like 9,400, I think. So still have, I think, top 5 potential upside. I believe I've got Mike Evans ranked at 105 this week. Again, the Buccaneers have the highest passing goal line grade. It's about 10 points less than the Rams rushing for, but still up there for the passing game. So I thought take advantage of that. Go with Mayfield and Mike Evans. Bit for Mike Evans, and the theory there is it's a play against paying up for Tyreek Hill. Leverage there just to bet on the Buccaneers stack instead. Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Kate Otten, and then the come around or the comeback play, whatever. I forget the term. I'm not a DFS guy, unfortunately. Uh, with the Panthers, I think there's two options depending on what price you want to pay and like what else you want to pay in lineups. Adam Thielen is 6,800 or 6,600. But the one I really am liking more and more is Jonathan Mingo. He's below 4,000. I believe he's 3,800. And he's kind of come on as the number 2 option for the team. And like, I think he got more targets last week than Adam Thielen. So as the corner turned on this rookie wide receiver, tend to see them hit later on in the season sometimes as rookies if they're going to hit. So, right from the, Puka Nacua right from week 1, but a lot of times you'll see them hit later in the season. So as Mingo turned that corner, and it sounds like they want him to be the number 1 wide receiver on the team at some point in the future, just that start now. So I think the a Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Kate Otten, Jonathan Mingo stack would work really well in DFS. But the one thing I will say, the one player that I think should be locked in lineups, whether it's cash or GPP, is Kyren Williams. And that goal line grade super high. He's only 7,200. I've got him at the RB2 this week, so I think he's got tons of upside and value based on that price. So Kyren Williams in there, that would be great. But they had the Buck stack, especially Baker and Mike Evans, the two that if I were to start one lineup, I'd start it around Baker, Evans, and then Kyren Williams, and then figure out the rest from there. Those are probably your two most expensive pieces too, of Mike Evans, Kyren Williams, 7,700, 7,200. think you can make really viable lines with those 2 as top 5 options, which with the leverage against most people are gonna probably play McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill, and I do have them as the number 1 player of their position. If you listen to the Full Press Fantasy Pod this week, we'll know that. Brad and I discussed that, for the first time I can remember where we've both done rankings and we've had the consensus where we all 3 had the same number 1 at all 4 position. We both Brad and I both had Jalen Hurts at as the QB1, and that was the consensus rank. Both had McCaffrey and Hill as mentioned, and then both had Travis Kelce as the tight end 1, and that was they all matched the consensus. I don't think that's ever happened before. Brad and I were first off, that hasn't really happened where number 1's the position. Usually, there'll be one of us that's off. Sometimes we've had the same, and usually when we do that, it's against consensus somewhere. Someone isn't the same. But yes, for all 4 to be exactly the same, I think, by Apocalypse Week, there's just so few options available. Probably makes sense. But yeah, I think McCaffrey and Hill will be great. Paying over 9,000 for them, which is impressive. I'm sure Vegeta would think that's impressive. Over 9,000 for Tyreek Hill? Crazy. Um, but I think the good leverage points is to still get top 5 players at their positions, but pay sometimes $2,000 less than the $2,200 difference between Tyreek Hill and Kyren Williams, and I think there's just as much upside. So that would be my kinda DFS advice for the week. I don't usually do it, but I went and I explored lineups this weekend, and that was the one thing I kinda really kept coming back to is play Kyren Williams in every lineup, but, no one's really talking about Mike Evans this week. I've heard some mention of those other guys in the stack, Baker, um, Cotton, and Mingo. No one's really talked about Mike Evans. I wonder if he's expensive enough that people will see, okay, everyone wants to get on Hill, so they're wide receiver 2, they're not gonna pay 7,700 for, they're gonna have to pay a little less. I wonder if Mike Evans' ownership is gonna be really low this week, and if he managed to pay off, it'll be a true difference maker in the lineup. So, yeah, Baker Mayfield, Kyren Williams, Mike Evans would be my kinda DFS locks at their positions. And then, yeah, pay down a tight end. It looks like it's a good week to pay down. But Kittle is the top on the main slate anyway, the most expensive tight end. But that's the DFS advice, and it kinda takes us right to 12 noon, and I'll get the active, inactive reports, for week 13, and, we'll, yeah, do that. So while that's, pulled up, we start with the Arizona Cardinals. So, the Cardinals have made Michael Wilson, the rookie wide receiver, inactive, and so is wide receiver Zach Pascal. However, the couple questionable players for the Cardinals were Marquise Brown at wide receiver and Trey McBride at tight end. They're both playing. So I actually think Trey McBride's top 5 tight end this week. Steelers. So those players are active and playing. Atlanta Falcons, Mac Hollins is inactive again, dealing with an injury. I don't know if there's, especially against the Jets, you really want to play anyone other than Drake London as a wide receiver. They've got other options, Van Jefferson, Kadero Hodge. I don't really want them in lineups. Drake London, Bijan Robinson, maybe Kyle Pitts. Desmond Ridder, if you're really desperate at quarterback, I mean, I've got him, I think, inside the top 28 quarterbacks, might be 18, 19. Not really. I think there's stronger options available. Baker, Gardner Minshew, 2 that really come to mind that I'd much rather play those 2. So, yeah, those 3 main weapons, 3 top 10 picks in Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson. Denver Broncos, no one really of fantasy relevance. I don't really think anyone was questionable either, so all's good with Denver this week. Detroit, really the biggest inactive is on defense, Alex Anzalone at linebacker. Does that mean a better week for the Saints running the ball? Maybe. I mean, throw the ball that well. Derek Carr, that was one thing we discussed on the Full Press Fantasy Pod this week, how another week where I'm just so much further lower than on consensus than Derek Carr. A lot of his receivers appear to be out, but we'll get to that in a second here. Um, yeah, nothing really major on offense for the Lions, Texans. Noah Brown is active. So those 8 of 9 lineups where I have Noah Brown in there, I don't have to go and panic and find a replacement. Although I will say one thing I did is I wrote it down every league. This is the player, so I can just after the stream's on, if he was out, I could just go to that and already know who I'm going to replace him with. Will Brown is active, folks, so I don't like playing Robert Woods then. I think, 1 or 2 weeks maybe have him. I think there's one spot for sure I'm gonna play him. I think that might be it. Try to minimize that exposure because top 3 receivers actually, Tank Dell was questionable too, so I should also mention that, but they'll be it looks like full force at the wide receiver room for the Texans. However, this was announced yesterday, so no surprise breaking news here, most likely, but, Dalton Schultz at tight end is out, so I already mentioned it. Brevin Jordan will be starting at tight end, especially in DFS at 2,500, he's great. Honestly, in the Scott Fish Bowl, I kinda put all my hope on Darren Waller in such a strong tight end league. I wanted to spend up in every other position and try and, like, minimize my way to getting some good elite tight ends. I went and I picked up Brevin Jordan, and honestly, I think to flex him because I got Juwan Johnson in the Scott Fish Bowl as well. Gonna throw both in lineups in that Scott Fish Bowl lineup in the playoffs, onto the second week of the playoffs this week, so hoping that, had a really strong week last week. Without a strong week, I was kind of in risk of being eliminated, so I need to put up another really strong 200 plus point week in the SFB and, but yeah, news for the Texans again, Tank Dell and Noah Brown are active. They are playing. Tank Dell especially, I think must start in lineups. I've got him at wide receiver 9, I think. So he's to me a must start. And then honestly, I would say Noah Brown is mostly a must start. Again, I've got him. He's my most rostered fantasy player. Most exposure to him. I've got him in 9 leagues. I'm playing him in 8 of those 9 leagues. Honestly, that ninth one I might go and look again. Now that I know for sure he's active, I think I maybe hold him out just to have that one chance where if he does bad, I have that one league to be like, well, at least I made the right decision there. Um, but I might also regret not playing him in that one he smashes. So really like CJ Stroud this week again. Now that he's got other than Dalton Schultz, a full complement of at least wide receivers and the 3 he's had. Nico Collins again, Tank Dell must start, but Dalton Schultz is out for the Texans. Indianapolis Colts, Jonathan Taylor's out. He's not been put on injured reserve, and I think they've mentioned it'll be at least 2 weeks. So maybe they're being nice and hoping, we're hoping Jonathan Taylor comes back for the fantasy playoffs. Week 15, that first week of the fantasy playoffs, it looks like that's his current time to be able to return. We'll see. Zach Moss gets the start. DFS wise, I think the one thing I've heard on DFS content, specifically the Armchair Fantasy Show, again going for Two Live Network, the other place I can do. They do a DFS show Friday nights, and Zach Moss is essentially a free square in cash games, but you could avoid him in PPs. I think that would be my play in bigger tournament entries. I think so many people will play him. He's good, and he'll get you a solid floor. I just don't know if necessarily the upside's there. I think there's more upside through the passing game, and so I would rather go with Josh Downs, who's a little bit more expensive than Zach Moss, but I think should have a great week. So that'd be my leverage play there too. It's all about leverage. All the obvious evidence stuff is going to be there, but play lineups that aren't so obvious and evident. But yeah, nothing else in terms of impacts on the offense other than Jonathan Taylor is inactive, and we knew that. They announced that pretty early in the week. So looks like he's going to miss 2 weeks, it seems. So hoping he returns for week. LA Chargers, a few healthy scratches like Isaiah Spiller, Simi Fehoko, Nick Vannett, but yeah, the main plays will still be there. Eckler, and Josh Kelly at running back to a certain extent. Trying to think what else. I mean, of course, Herbert. Keenan Allen was questionable. So yeah, I guess I should say Keenan Allen is active. So he will be playing. So that's good news there for the Chargers. That's really buried the lead there. Miami Dolphins, they announced that Chan would be available, so they'll have all 3 running backs active. Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, Devon Achane. Who knows how they will split it. And there's a couple leagues where I would have played Jeff Wilson if Noah Brown was out. Luckily, I don't have to worry about that now. I think I've got one league still where I'm starting Jeff Wilson, but I do not have to play him in multiple leagues. Robbie Chosen, otherwise known as Robbie Anderson, I guess, or Robbie Anderson. He's an active. I'm trying to think who would even be the like. I know there's one league where I'm going to start Cedric Wilson this week, so that doesn't feel necessarily the greatest. But yeah, I think maybe more the wide receiver thing, maybe Braxton Berrios, probably not. So really, you want Tyreek, you want Waddle. Looks like it's a great game. Cedric Wilson could, in theory, have a good game, but man, I'm starting him in one spot. I really don't want to. So yeah, Tyler Kroft, tight end's inactive. Tyler Thompson, a QB, is inactive. Mike will be playing as the lead tight end, and there's weeks where he gets 0 targets. So it's not even worth it. That just seems like a position where don't even bother. And I think the Dolphins have kind of approached that too. They're not putting serious investment. Franchise tag Mike Gesicki last year. I think they realized that was a mistake. They're gonna just spend the minimum to get a tight end. Don't tell the Dolphins about tight end thing. They don't. They won't. What is that? That doesn't exist. Um, yeah, they're gonna do what I like to do in a lot of leagues, which is go as minimal as possible tight end because you just want as many other good pieces as possible. That offense is them certainly on defense. New England Patriots. So Demario Douglas out with the concussion. Jermichael Hasty, who is the greatest running back of all time. No, he's not. I like him too much. But he's also an active, healthy scratch. Seems like he just hasn't been able to overtake Ty Montgomery as that like hybrid running back guy. Ramondre Stevenson will get most of the work. Ezekiel Elliott was questionable, but he is active and he will play. Kayshon Boutte is inactive. He matters. No one was going to play him anyway. For the New Orleans Saints, running back Kendre Miller's inactive, and wide receiver Rashid Shaheed. But that means Chris Olave is in. So the concussion suffered last week. You see a lot of those players with concussion. They very rarely make it to that next game. Chris Olave is there, so he's in lineups for sure. To me, he's a top. I've got him right at the cusp of top 15, but certainly a top 20 wide receiver this week. Yeah, I'll start Chris Olave. There's a couple leagues where I've got Lynn Bowden starting, and I might reconsider that. We'll see. I might still end up playing him because, again, there's no Rashid Shaheed, so Lynn Bowden might effectively be the number 2 wide receiver on the team. I still think it's a really strong week for Juwan Johnson, especially. Taysom Hill, for those who wanna play him, makes a lot of sense too. New York Jets. Randall Cobb is inactive, and it looks like as a result of that, they'll put Allen Lazard in. Zach Wilson is inactive, so I guess that means Trevor Siemian is the backup to Tim Boyle, and I do wonder if Tim Boyle plays bad enough, is he gonna have a really short leash on this game? Like, if they're not beating the Falcons and, they get halftime and they decide we're gonna throw Siemian in the second half. So I don't really wanna play Tim Boyle. I think I've got him as the second lowest quarterback this week. The only one lower is Bailey Zappi. Honestly tempted to switch that or kick off. Put Boyle as the lowest just with the thought of he might get benched if they really wanna give a shot to Siemian and see what they have there. Pittsburgh Steelers. Running back Anthony McFarland is inactive. Uh, Not doing much other than special teams. Mason Rudolph's also inactive there. So now that Deontay's back, it looks like the full healthy Steelers team is there. Yeah, Deontay's back. Freiermuth is back. Everyone's there. So approach as normal as with the Steelers. Tennessee Titans, Malik Willis inactive, so Tannehill will be the starter, or sorry, the backup. There was talk earlier in the week. Will Levis was questionable, but that isn't. He is playing, so Tannehill is definitely not starting. It is Malik, as it is Will Levis. Malik Willis is inactive. So I wondered if they might have made him third quarterback active with Will Levis, with Will Levis questionable, but they decided not to. So it shows us should have pretty full faith in Will Levis. I think if they're worried about him, probably see Malik Willis active. I don't really think he's a strong play against the Colts. Pretty good defense. I think I've got him at like QB 22. I've got him ahead of Derek Carr. Even and you know what, with Chris Olave back, maybe I could raise Derek Carr a little bit, but actually I put him in the pool, QB 23, so I'm gonna stick with that. Yeah, so Will Levis over Derek Carr this week. That's my take. If you're having to play either of them or even Kenny Pickett, as we just mentioned with the Steelers, probably not good anyway. So I don't know if there's much upside I love with any of those three. Kyle Phillips inactive at wide receiver. I think that Treylon Burks will be made active today, coming off the concussion that's cost him a couple weeks. So Treylon Burks back in there. I don't know that I would want to start him. I don't actually have him in any leagues. In leagues I did have him in, I did trade him this offseason. The DeAndre Hopkins going there, I was a little concerned for Burks. But yeah, gonna play today though. I don't think he's a really strong start. Washington, no really fantasy relevant inactives there. So everyone's got their players there. And just in time, I guess 4 minutes late, but a question from Nathan saying, "Good morning. Should I start Dell or Rice? Standard green, the snow for Rice and the injury for Dell. Also, should I start Herbert or Murray? Worried about the Keenan injury for Herbert." Okay, so Few things here. First off, Nathan, earlier in the episode, I was addressing this. I've got a Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray decision as well. That one complicates it. It's a super flex league, and I've got Jared Goff, so I have to start two of those three. And I've co-managed this. My co-manager and I, we decided to bench Kyler Murray. I do like Herbert over Murray. He does have a tough defense with the Steelers. Herbert also potentially tough defense with the Patriots, but I think at this point, I view the Steelers as the tougher unit. So I don't love the matchup for Murray in that sense. I still have him as a top 9 QB, so if you're really that worried about Keenan Allen's injury, I get the pivot, but I would personally go with Justin Herbert, and I am actually doing that in a league where I am playing Justin Herbert in the starting lineup and benching Kyler Murray, so that would be my decision there first. I could pull back up the start sit spreadsheet I had. Would be the exact tailored to your league settings, but at least show you why I prefer Herbert over Murray. As for Tank Dell to Rashee Rice, and again, this is the fact that Keenan Allen and Tank Dell are playing. Yes, there's injuries, but I'm also not overly concerned with them, which is why, again, I'm still going with Herbert, and I would still go with Tank Dell over Rashee Rice. You mentioned it, the snow for the Rice game tonight, that means there is concern there as much as there's you mentioned both risks. So if you take into account that both players have risky propositions, maybe their floors are lowered this week, I then go back to the argument of the ceiling. Who has a higher ceiling between Tank Dell and Rashee Rice? And both players have been able to catch touchdowns this year as rookies. Both, surprisingly, as rookies, have emerged as the number one wide receivers on their respective teams. That means two different things for these two different teams. The first is Travis Kelce's still there. So while there's some weeks he might not lead the team in receiving yards, he's still going to get the most targets. So the number one receiver on the Chiefs doesn't mean the number one target on the team. There have been weeks where Tank Dell is just smashing targets, back-to-back double-digit target weeks, and especially with no Dalton Schultz. Whoever is the number one receiver for the Texans is the number one target. And I think that's up for debate almost on a weekly basis. Some weeks it might be Nico Collins, like we saw last week. A few weeks ago, we saw it was Tank Dell. I think Noah Brown even had a wide receiver one week or a really crazy high wide receiver week in the top five. So I just think the upside of if everything smashes for Dell, this is a week where he's heavily targeted. He's going to have a lot more upside than Rashee Rice. And standard, so no points per reception. So you really are going for the upside of the play. Who do we think if they get the 2 touchdown game, who's going to go for over 100 yards? I think it's more likely to be Dell. Go for that higher ceiling play. So I would say, Nathan, to go with Tank Dell and to go with Justin Herbert. I'll go through my rankings really quick. I believe I've got Herbert at QB6. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Tank Dell inside the top 10. But yes, as my rankings show, yeah, Herbert QB6, Kyler Murray QB9. So there is, there's not that big a difference. So I do get, if you really think it's a massive risk of Keenan Allen's injury, I get the safety of Kyler Murray, and I mentioned that earlier. I'll share my spreadsheet so that the one appeal of Kyler Murray is 4. Of the 3 games he's played so far this year, he has not scored less than 17.5 fantasy. Again, in the league I have him specifically, I'm making this decision. That's a so, that's a PPR league, but the quarterback scoring probably doesn't change that much. There might be some differences, but for the most part, there'd be difference to one, it would affect the other. So Murray has the safer 4, but I think the upside really does go with Herbert. Uh, Slightly capped upside from Murray this year. He hasn't produced, and again, in this specific week, scored anything more than 23 fantasy points, whereas Herbert has put up 30-point weeks. So Herbert to me, the higher ranked guy, and then I have Tank Dell at wide receiver 9. Um, I initially even had him at wide receiver 7. I think the one thing I switched him and Nico Collins. So now it's Collins at 7, Tank Dell 9, and it was simply a matter of that injury. Questionable tag, wasn't sure how he was going to be. But as the wide receiver 9 to me seems like a must start. Rashee Rice, I've got him all the way down at wide receiver 27. So a sizable enough difference, Nathan, for me to the injury risk of Tank Dell. Again, they made him active. It seemed like he wasn't inactive like Schultz. That was the worst injury, and I don't know if it's the same team comparison, being biased there, but I'm not overly concerned with Tank Dell in this. I might be wrong, but again, my call here is to go with Tank Dell and to go with Justin Herbert. But thank you for joining this stream, Nathan, and finding that great question. I think some good high upside players there. Some really I don't know about the Cardinals, but some offenses we really like to invest in and are really excited about. I'm really excited about Kyler Murray, though, as a fantasy player. He's still great. Again, mentioned the floor he provides. So, the one thing I will show you here, Nathan, is, again, this starts its spreadsheet. So, as you see, the first 2 names on here are, Justin Herbert and Justin Herbert and Kyler Murray. That's not zoom. Uh, so yeah, so the one thing about them is Herbert's had a better average than Murray through Murray's 3 games, but again, the floor is what I mentioned is that's the significant advantage for Murray is that his rushing ability, he's going to provide a safe floor, one of the safest floors probably of any quarterback. 3 game sample size, so it's small, but 17.46 as in his floor in games in this scoring setting, that's appealing. But again, he hasn't everything has been between 17 and 23 points. He hasn't yet hit like a big massive ceiling game, and I don't know that that's coming against the Steelers. It depends on what your site projection is, but look at what that says. Like, what are they projecting? I know in this particular league, it's like a 6 point difference of Herbert and Murray. Not sure if that's extreme. The defensive rankings, this again, the scoring setting are basically close. Like neither look to be good matchups. In fact, if anything, Herbert's actually got the worst matchup here. Fifth fewest fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks for the Patriots, sixth fewest for the Steelers, though. So the matchup argument is almost null because both look like the game total. That's where the Chargers projected to score 23.25, the Cardinals 17. I think it's actually gone up since then. These were the Monday lines, and the over/under also favoring that Chargers Patriots game, not by too much though. My goal line guide article really puts a better grade for the Chargers, also a better difference. Their rushing score is worse than their passing score, whereas with the Cardinals, the rushing score is better, but then that could apply to Kyler Murray, so that's not too much of a difference. I think it's close. Like I said, I've got 3 spots difference in my rankings, but I would still lead with, the, not Kyler, Herbert, sorry, distracted there. Yeah, so that would be, that's kind of my reasoning for Herbert over Murray specifically. As for Dell over Rice, I've just got a sizable enough difference in my ranking. Going with Tank Dell there. Hope, Nathan, you enjoyed the explanation on, what I've done, what I'm going through, and how I make my decisions. Really appreciate anyone who is watching, listening. I hope everyone has enjoyed this live stream again every Sunday morning. FPC Fantasy Live during the NFL season will be here. I'm Kyle Senra at Senra Says. I co-host the Full Press Fantasy Pod and for Packers Gear, Full Press Packers Pod as well. So episodes every week, sometimes twice a week, especially the Packers Pod, doing reactions to previous games and then previewing the upcoming games. So appreciate everyone to check that out at FPC underscore Packers, at FPC underscore Fantasy Pod. And we loves fantasy football. Definitely recommend checking that out every week. At Harvard and I will get some rankings debates. I'll talk in depth about the goal line guide every week and some other topics that we get fantasy wise every week. But yeah, like I mentioned, Kyle Senra at Senra Says. If anyone wants to DM, talk fantasy anytime. That's super awesome. I love helping out. I love talking fantasy football. Glad Nathan was here to join with that question. Anyone else who's listening, watching, hopefully you took something from this. Were able to gain some insight on factors to look at when making start sit decisions and some other potential plays when it comes to injured players later on. Some strategies to go about that. And, best of luck fantasy wise today, folks. Week 13 is here, and should be a great day, some great games. And best of luck in fantasy football, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of FPC Fantasy Live.